Mother never had hospitals. We have homes for those not accepted in the hospital. You know, that quote from Sister Mary Prima Pyrrhic instantly challenges so many of our basic assumptions, doesn't it? When we think of Mother Teresa, we almost automatically picture this saintly figure walking through massive, modernized medical facilities. But the historical reality of what she actually built and the fierce debates surrounding it all are so much more complex than the popular legend.
Welcome to today's Explainer. Okay, let's dive right into this. We are taking a completely impartial, incredibly focused look at one of the 20th century's most recognizable, yet deeply polarizing figures. We're going to deconstruct the myth, the reality, and the ongoing legacy of Mother Teresa of Calcutta, and we'll be drawing directly from historical records, critical reviews, and contemporary photojournalism to do it.
Here's our roadmap for today. Number 1, the Missionaries of Charity. 2, the Critic's Verdict. 3, contextualizing the mission. 4, a private spiritual secret. And finally, 5, the legacy today. So we'll be looking objectively at both the harsh criticisms and the historical defenses right from our sources.
Let's start with Section 1, the Missionaries of Charity, a global order born in Calcutta. To really grasp these debates, we first have to understand the sheer, massive scale of the organization itself. When you trace the history, the rapid global growth of this order is just wild. I mean, it was founded back in 1950 with just a dozen members in Calcutta. By 1965, they were already opening their very first overseas house in Venezuela. Fast forward past the founding of the Fathers Branch in 1984, all the way to 2023, and this organization has swelled to nearly 6,000 members operating in 139 countries. That is a staggering expansion.
Now, what actually glues this massive network together? It's 4 strict vows. Like a lot of orders, they take vows of chastity, poverty, and obedience. But it's that 4th vow, wholehearted free service to the poorest of the poor, that absolutely sets them apart. Their mandate was never just, general charity. It was laser-focused on the absolutely destitute. We're talking refugees, abandoned children, and the dying. The truly invisible members of society.
Section 2, the Critic's Verdict, the antithesis. Because, as you can imagine, immense global influence brings some seriously intense scrutiny. We're pivoting cleanly here into the antithesis, looking at the fierce critics who argue her global reputation was heavily manufactured. Listen to this reality check from reviewer Tim Challies, examining Arup Chatterjee's extensively documented book. He says the reality of the woman and her work is a far cry from the legend. And this is crucial. Chatterjee isn't just some external observer. He's a native of Calcutta who researched her legacy exhaustively. He presents a very severe reality check.
Now, what's really interesting here is the sheer scale of the discrepancies Chatterjee claims to have found. Medically, critics point out her primary hospice only had an 80-bed capacity, and they allege needles were reused and head shaving was forced. When it comes to resources, they claim ambulances were mostly just used to transport nuns to prayer, while destitute citizens calling for help were told to just dial 102, the local emergency number. And financially, she was heavily criticized for accepting money from incredibly suspicious sources, like convicted American fraudster Charles Keating.
But honestly, the most divisive criticism wasn't even logistical. It was ideological. Critics hit hard, arguing she didn't actually want to cure poverty. She wanted to glorify it. They claimed she intentionally denied patients strong painkillers because she believed suffering evoked Christ's suffering. Yet, and here's where the hypocrisy claim comes in, they argued that when she herself fell ill, she immediately sought out exclusive, expensive hospitals. This specific tension, that sets up the central debate we really need to explore next.
Section 3, contextualizing the mission, the synthesis. To get to the truth behind these massive claims, we have to look at the deep historical context, drawing from historical analysis in Anjezë magazine. Evaluating her work by today's Western medical standards completely ignores a deeply grim historical reality.
So the crucial point here is the reality of the medical supply chain back then. Critics say she sadistically withheld strong painkillers, but historically, the Indian government had been rapidly suppressing opium right after independence. By 1959, the sale of opium was totally prohibited. Morphine was incredibly scarce even in top-tier state hospitals. The lack of painkillers wasn't some sadistic ideological choice. It was a systemic national reality. It literally wasn't an option.
We also really need to clarify something fundamental. Mother Teresa didn't run hospitals. She ran hospices. A hospice provides comfort and dignity in those final months, not curative treatments. When she opened her first home in 1952, modern palliative care didn't even exist yet. The first modern hospice with palliative care wasn't founded until 1967 in the UK, a full 15 years after she began her work.
To really put this into perspective, we have to anchor ourselves in the incredibly grim reality of 1970s Calcutta. This was a city totally reeling from post-independence partition and massive economic collapse. You had 70% of the population living in poverty. There were 200,000 beggars fighting just for space on the sidewalks. State hospitals were completely overwhelmed and actively rejecting dying, destitute patients. Her homes were, quite literally, the only alternative to dying alone in the gutter.
And what about that huge claim of hypocrisy? The idea that she sought out luxurious medical treatment for herself while denying it to others? Well, biographers note she actually fiercely resisted elite hospitalization. When she fell ill in 1994, she went to a standard public facility in Delhi. Her own physician literally called her the worst patient because she constantly had to be pressured to accept advanced interventions, and at one point she flatly refused a ventilator.
Moving on to Section 4, a private spiritual secret, the human element. Behind all these fierce debates about her public actions was a deeply, deeply private spiritual mindset, revealed later in a series of highly personal letters.
This brilliantly illustrates her internal state. She actually wrote this to her spiritual advisors. The existence of my letters is no longer necessary. I want to burn them so that everything related to me is destroyed. I want the secrets between me and God to belong only to us. Think about that contrast for a second. We're talking about a massively public, global icon, someone criticized for building this highly visible, manufactured legend, who in reality desperately sought complete private anonymity. She wanted her personal thoughts literally burned to ash to maintain a secret vulnerability with her faith, totally away from the cameras, the crowds, and the critics.
Finally, Section 5, the legacy today, Calcutta's modern reality. Let's look right past the Western media lens and see how her legacy actually functions on the ground today in modern Calcutta, drawing from the Magnum Photos retrospective by Sohrab Hora.
What Hana found on the ground was a legacy that's highly nuanced but deeply respected. Local university students, who are usually the first to protest, they acknowledge the strict religious backdrop of her charity, sure, but they fundamentally respect the work done for the invisible poor. For homeless locals like a man named Raju, the legacy isn't some theoretical historical debate. It means a volunteer arriving every single morning without fail to change the bandages on his feet. Because of that tangible, everyday human impact locally, her image remains largely untarnished.
But there's this really fascinating limit to all of this. Out in the destitute outer slums, Hura discovered that younger generations, those born after she died in 1997, literally do not even recognize her name. It perfectly demonstrates how even the most massive, globally debated historical legacies can completely fade in the very communities they were originally built to serve.
Which brings us to a really profound final thought. As cities swell and urban living becomes harsher, the burden continues to just fall on the poor. Sohrab Hura points out that Mother Teresa's work ultimately shines a giant spotlight on the absence of the state. It forces us to ask, as society spends all this time debating the methods of one controversial missionary, what has the modern state actually done to deal with urban poverty in a humane way? It's a question that pushes us to look past the historical figure and right at the systems we rely on today. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and keep learning.